Como nasceu o Jardim de Flores? Planejamento central ou ordem espontânea?
O nosso próximo painel conta com a participação de Adriano Paranaíba, economista, professor do IFG e diretor acadêmico do Instituto Mises Brasil. Alain Bertaud, urbanista e pesquisador francês, e Titus Gebel, empresário alemão, fundador da Free Private Cities. Eu lembro a todos que nós teremos QR Codes nos telões aqui, de um lado e de outro. Apontem, por favor, a câmera do celular de vocês e participem com comentários e perguntas sobre esse próximo painel. Chamo, então, Fernanda de Gasperin, diretora de comunicação do IEE, que vai ser a mediadora desse próximo painel.
Olá, pessoal. Bem-vindos de volta ao Fórum da Liberdade. Vamos mais para uma sequência de belas palestras, começando com essa sobre planejamento urbano e urbanismo. Ao entrar na Toca do Coelho, pelo buraco da fechadura, Alice se depara com um belo jardim de flores e decide que o melhor plano é encontrar um caminho para aquele jardim encantador. Mas havia uma dificuldade: colocar o plano em prática. Do alto das pranchetas, cidades são desenhadas. Regras, normas e planos que regulam o espaço urbano são criados. O ideal de cidade é criado em papéis, distante da realidade, longe das ruas, das calçadas e das pessoas que as constroem. Leis urbanísticas excessivamente rígidas e regulatórias são como o corredor escuro, que bloqueiam o acesso ao jardim. Elas limitam as possibilidades de desenvolvimento das cidades e impedem que as pessoas vivam em locais que atendam às suas necessidades e desejos. Cidades são como sistemas complexos que vivem de interações e de trocas. Permitir que as pessoas façam suas próprias escolhas em relação ao lugar que moram, trabalham e se divertem faz parte da natureza dessas interações. É possível planejar e controlar esse sistema complexo? Há como o planejamento urbano negar as interações de mercado? Qual a importância da propriedade privada para as cidades? Como as cidades brasileiras se encaixam nesse contexto? E, afinal, como nasceu o Jardim das Flores da Alice? Para discutir esses e outros temas, damos início ao painel Planejamento Central ou Ordem Espontânea, que começa agora. Alan, Titus, Adriano, sejam bem-vindos ao Fórum da Liberdade. É o Alan. So we can start now. Each one of you have 15 minutes. Then we go to the Q&A.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a great honor. And it gave me also the opportunity to visit this very interesting city that I have never seen before. I've been in Brazil several times, but I never had the opportunity of coming to Porto Alegre. And there is a lot to learn, even for a very old person like me. So let us start. The theme of my talk is that cities are labor market and that there is a spontaneous order which really designs cities. Cities are not designed by urban planners, they are designed by the people who live in those cities and who are entrepreneurs or who work for the entrepreneur. this is sometimes difficult to accept to many of my colleagues who like cities very much. They feel that there is much more in a city than just going to work and going back home at the end of the evening. But we have to recognize that all the things we like in cities, whether it's going to concerts or to restaurant or meeting our friend in a cafe, all this, or going to a museum, all this is possible only if the labor market is working. The labor market is, in fact, the foundation of all the things we like in cities. The day the labor market collapsed for, it could be several reasons, everything, all this cultural superstructure that we like is collapsing at the same time. We had, for instance, a recent example in the United States when the city of Detroit, for a number of reasons, had a labor market collapse. Everything in Detroit collapsed at the same thing. In particular, Detroit has one of the most beautiful art museums in the world. They were in such condition that they were considering selling all their paintings in order to finance just the survival of the city. So that's just an example of the importance of the labor market. But how does this labor market work? First, we have to recognize that the important word in labor market is market. That means that people are free to move from one job to another, to change job easily, and employers are also free to hire within the city the type of people who are the most relevant to their business. So this freedom of moving, both for the worker and for the employer, is very important. The second thing is, where do they locate themselves within the city? And that, again, is a very important choice that urban planners cannot anticipate, because each household is making trade-off between location in the city, therefore access to job, but also the consumption of land and the consumption of floor space. These are things that are trade-off that are peculiar to every household. There might be also other reasons for a household to select one location rather than another. It could be because they want to be next to their mother-in-law who will babysit their children. It could be to be next to a school which teach Japanese. It could be anything. And this type of thing, urban planner cannot anticipate. So what is the role of urban planners? I'm an urban planner myself, so I don't want to get out of business. So the role of an urban planner is very important, but it is to develop the infrastructure which will allow people to move across a city. So you see, 4 years ago, the mayor of Paris had this, to get reelected, she had this slogan that Paris was a 15-minute city. Now, if it was 15 minutes to go from one part of Paris to another one, I have no problem with that. I think it's excellent. But she specified that it should be just by walking. So 15 minutes walking in a city, which, if you take metropolitan Paris, is 12 million people, that means that you live in a very large city, but in fact, you are restricted to a village. And the essence itself of cities is a possibility to meet randomly a lot of people. The larger is a labor market in a city, we have found that the more effective it is, more efficient it is, and the most creative it is. I will not go over all my slides here because of the time limit, but in my work around the world, I stumble on the largest labor market in the world, which is in the south of China, the Pearl River Delta, which is Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Macau. This area now has on a square, more or less, of 100, excuse me, sorry. A square of 100 kilometers by 120 kilometers have 92 million people. 92 million people who have the possibility of working together. The Chinese are developing an infrastructure which will allow to go from one part of this region to another in less than 1 hour very soon. They have not achieved it yet. If this is possible, we will have a labor market, integrated labor market, which is larger than the entire population of Germany. From the data we have, this will be probably the most productive and innovative city in the world. We have a challenge is to compete with that. And it's certainly not to divide cities into little independent villages. It's to have, to the contrary, a transport system which allows to those labor markets to work. So, I have been talking about this spontaneous order, which is the way firms and households distribute themselves across a metropolitan area. And so the role of the planner is, in fact, to develop an infrastructure which will serve this spontaneous order. Very often, my colleague planner, well, I accuse always the planners, it could be other people too, usually prefer to design a system of transport and then say, in order for our system of transport to work, we will have to decide on the allocation of the population and across the metropolitan area. And I think this is wrong. It should be the opposite. They should observe the order which has emerged. For instance, if we see a secondary center emerging, the infrastructure should serve them and not the opposite. Finally, my last point is about regulation. The regulation are imposed very often, and have been imposed long ago, by planners who thought to redesign the city. They thought they were in good faith. I don't believe in conspiracy. I think they were in good faith, but they designed regulation because they wanted to design the city. It was not to separate, incompatible use, really. It was to design the city. So, for instance, they will have, high density, high FAR, high building in one part and another, and these were very, very arbitrary. I do not have time, unfortunately, to show you, for instance, the evidence on the city of New York. I had some slides for that, but it shows how arbitrary it is. In Manhattan, if you look at the land use regulation, which were promulgated in 1065, it shows that now, compared to there are too many dwelling units, there are too many commerce, the buildings are too high. This is absurd. We do not have enough dwelling units in Manhattan. And this was decided just, 50 years ago by planners who didn't have any clue, really, of the way city will develop. So I think that our role is to do I'm not against regulation, by the way. I think some regulation are absolutely indispensable, in particular fire regulation or sanitation regulation. But any regulation which regulates the consumption of floor space and land, I think establish a rigidity which prevents the development of the city. I will give an example. In every city of the world, including the richest one of the main problems is housing affordability. There are not enough housing, and especially not enough housing for the indispensable people who are working, the most, let's say, labor work, So imagine if you have a city where some people are starving. Does it make sense that you put a regulation saying now it's forbidden to eat less than 2,000 calories a day? This is exactly what our regulations are doing. They are saying the minimum floor space for an apartment is this. if you are living in this part of the city, you have to consume at least that much land. You know, the market will consume less land. This is what the floor ratio is doing, obliging you to consume more land and more floor space. So again, let us get back to common sense, audit those regulations, remove the regulations which are not useful, but some are certainly useful, but we should, for every regulation, we should find what is their use. If nobody can justify their use, remove them. Thank you very much.
Titus, we can keep with you. It's okay?
Yeah. Okay, I'm waiting for my presentation. I'm glad to be here, coming over from Europe. Formalities first. I want to file a protest. Where is my lawyer, Gustavo? I've been told there's a 15 to 20 minute speech, and now there's a clock saying 10 minutes. So, tough call. I'm telling you a little bit about free cities and what free cities, how the big question here about central planning or spontaneous order would be dealt with in free cities. Not all of you have heard about this. What is a free city? Generally, it's a self-governing territories that uphold individual rights and freedom. That's a relatively broad definition. Some of you might have heard about my concept. It's called a free private city. And a free private city is one of the most autonomous in this area. It starts when it goes to internal autonomy. On the left-hand side, you have liberty-focused intentional communities, so people who are like-minded individuals that just settle together. Maybe they set up some rules, but they have zero legal autonomy from the state laws. And you have special economic zones. You have one in Brazil, in Manaus. They have different laws to some degrees. Then you have charter cities, an idea of the Nobel laureate Paul Romer, where you have a little bit more autonomy. And then you have in autonomous regions within nation states, special administrative regions like Hong Kong and Macau. And then you have free private cities that have even larger autonomy from the state. And finally, sea states on the high seas, which are subject to no state sovereignty. So why is this? Because I think their governance as a service is the new coming thing. It may be some generations to unfold, but we can see here a development. In the past, the king was the representative of God on earth, and people believed that up to a point when they started not to believe it any longer. Then they elected somebody who says, I'm the representative of the collective, so you have to obey me, which is for people like me not really satisfying any longer, that a group of people is ruling my complete life, changing the rules any day, and it's never me that is changing the rules, always the other side. So more and more people are thinking, isn't government just a service, and I want a good service? So yes, it is. Government is a service, and it can be done, therefore, by a private service provider. And that is the idea of free private cities that are based basically on a citizen's contract, a real social contract, a written service contract, protecting your life, liberty, and property against a fixed fee. So the private operator is a governance service provider. The establishment needs a contract with the state. So the state would recognize this internal autonomy in most areas, not defense, not foreign policy. So this is the typical two systems, one country model. And for everything else in a city, you would be free to make your own arrangements, including social security. You can associate with others. You can support the cases you want. You can streamline your own pension system, your education, your healthcare. So it is rethinking urbanism because the idea is that 3 private cities are built new on uninhabited ground because they rely 100% on voluntary participation because everybody has to sign a contract. That means normally you have to start from scratch. And then you can also design it as a livable city on a human scale, distinctly local, but still connected to the rest of the world. And now we are nearing the point that what about central planning or spontaneous order? How do we design these new free cities? Well, let me first give you some shock pictures. The thing on the left costs more than the one on the right. On first sight, how is this possible? Well, first, much more land is used because the other model on the right is more dense. Then you have all the costs for commuting in and out to the working place. You have more maintenance, more sewage, more water, more electricity lines than in the traditional city. And it's much, much more ugly, right? Same here, right? To the left costs more than to the right. And here you can see on the left side what people call stroads, which is a mixture between street and road, because these do not fulfill either. It's not a street, it's not a road. It's just an obstacle of people getting together. And in the traditional city, you can see there's a real public space that is used as such. One of the big problems of our modernist cities is public spaces have disappeared. And you can see, if you look at the left, why. It's just too distant. The buildings are ugly and you can only get there by car. And why are we paying for these non-places? Well, because political money replaced market money and established a powerful bureaucratic class to social engineer according to their ideas and ideologies. The market wouldn't have paid for that, right? Nobody here in this room would have paid for Brasilia, including me. It's just not a place where you feel comfortable. And why? Because human nature was a problem and we need a new modern man. And then people came up with ideas like that, and fancy architects were discussed in fancy papers, and presidents wanted to get some light, some of this celebrity light shining on them, so let's build a new city. That wasn't a market decision. And that is even worse, right? Old cities are no longer possible because it would be illegal alone for parking requirements, right? You want to build a new apartment, you need 3 parking lots. And that makes that structure impossible, right? That is the problem. The majority of people might like this, but unfortunately, few decision makers, not you, have other ideas. And they have a plethora of media supporting them. That is the problem. So you see here problems. Architecture is reduced to isolated objects, not concerned with what happens between buildings. Again, disappearance of public spaces. The public realm is neglected. Traditional development patterns, like in the old cities, are impossible, all zoned out. Children can't walk to school, the aged are marginalized, family compounds impossible. These non-places are extremely detrimental to the formation of social structures, which means a physical exchange with other people, and vital institutions. I mean, look at that, right? How should people cooperate with each other if there's a big road between them? I was recently in Dubai, and it was about the same distance on the right from the left over the street, and there was a big shopping mall on the other side. And I said, can I go to this shopping mall? No, it's not possible. It wasn't foreseen that there was any pedestrian crossing on the road. So you had to take a taxi cab, drive to the next roundabout, and then go to the other side of the street, right? And people don't care about that, at least the planners. So what we have now, developers, architects, clients, they are of course today trying their best to fix that, but it's a broken system. And the new attempts have the same urban and society results, right? It's a little bit green, but that doesn't change the problem. And now what can we do about that? Most urbanists are in agreement that we cannot continue like that. And the idea is to go on smaller scale. But the problem is that this might work for single buildings. But if you want the whole fabric of a city to be as it was in the past, in ancient times, in times of the Renaissance, old Europe, then the whole system has to be changed. So let the market make decisions. Let small scale, small people make their decisions, how they manage their street, their houses, their quarters. And not big real estate developers according to big zoning plans, which are a big political issue. So go back, small scale, and then these things can develop. But this means a total change in design of the legal framework. And therefore, free cities are ideal to make this happen because they can start from scratch. They don't have all this burdensome existing regulation that makes such models impossible or very difficult. So how is a free city planned? This is a real life project. We have normally a core which is a little bit master planned because we have to be attractive, otherwise nobody is coming, right? So chicken egg problem, you have to do some initial infrastructure, but the more you go to the outside, patterns can emerge by themselves. You have only room for streets are there, but everything else is left open. So the more you go from this core to the sides, the more spontaneous order can happen. And for the existing or for the prefabricated core, we have a kind of a system that is imitating a potential 100-year development. Practical challenge is you cannot wait 100 years and to see how this is going to work if you're creating a new city or expanding in a city. So what you can do is to create a city pattern out of examples of real cities and say, okay, that's normally how cities develop if they are developing over a certain period of time, surviving all kinds of political idea and zoning laws. Because the problem with parameter models, I admit that, is you do not know how humans will behave. So it's very difficult to get artificial intelligence, a computer, and say that's how it works. And so far, all these master plan ideas, they will not work because it's one guy making a master plan, deciding this is how it looks like. And that's why it's not really serving your needs. You have to find a different model, and this is my last slide. Take tradition as a model and a process as a solution. Develop a pattern based on the trial and errors of history. Of course, history does not repeat, but it rhymes. So you can find a little bit, okay, how did cities develop over time? And especially it accounts for all kinds of complexities in human natures because it's market and price driven. That means people will pay for beauty. They will not necessarily pay for functionality only. And that means you will automatically get a different kind of city than if it's master planned and approved by politics. And allow these with as less regulation as possible, as more market transaction as possible, like air rights and all kinds of new ideas where people can pay for what they want instead of getting a top-down solution from the government what they have to want. And insofar, we will also learn, but I think the city of the future will more look like the city of the past than the city that we have now. And if you're interested in all these ideas, I've written a book called Free Private Cities, Making Governments Compete for You. It's also available in Portuguese. And if you're interested further, Google the Free Cities Foundation to find out more. And I hope that I can see some of you in one of the future free cities. Thank you very much.
Adriano, seguimos contigo.
Boa tarde a todos. Pô, mas que boa tarde mais... Tá. Boa tarde a todos. Aê, muito bem, parabéns. Eu vou falar na tribuna porque eu acho que é uma das coisas mais chiques do mundo, essa tribuna aqui do Fórum da Liberdade, tá? Sensacional. Gente, então, quero agradecer aí o convite para estar aqui falando com vocês a respeito dessas questões do urbanismo e do transporte, essas coisas. Mas, para tanto, eu queria começar fazendo uma pergunta para vocês. Eu queria que vocês levantassem a mão as pessoas que têm medo que o Brasil vai virar um país comunista. Quem tem medo do Brasil virar um país comunista? Pode levantar a mão. O Alexandre de Moraes não está aqui hoje. Quem tem medo do Brasil ser um país comunista? Tá. Vamos então supor... Mas vamos definir o que é um país comunista, né? Vamos pensar, o que seria... O que traria alegria para o Stalin, por exemplo? Né? Se a gente parar, nós temos uma dupla dinâmica hoje muito forte, né? Que é o Putin e o sei lá o nome desse maluco. Será que o Stalin ia apoiar esses dois caras? Eu vou dizer uma coisa para vocês. Se eu fosse o Stalin, eu estaria muito puto com esses dois. Pô, o Putin não consegue... Quanto tempo o Putin está tentando invadir a Ucrânia e não consegue, velho? É muita incompetência, né, meu? A China, potência aí, podia ter derrubado os Estados Unidos há muito tempo e nunca derrubou. Poxa, é uma incompetência. O Stalin estaria chateado. Agora, se tem uma dupla dinâmica que eu acho que deixaria o Stalin muito feliz, é essa dupla aqui. O Conselho de Arquitetura e Urbanismo do Brasil e o IFAM. A alegria do Stalin, gente. O Putin chora no banho quando pensa no cal. Enquanto ele não consegue invadir a Ucrânia, essas duas instituições invadem cada uma das propriedades privadas brasileiras em mais de 5.500 municípios. Amigos, se vocês têm medo de viver num país comunista, infelizmente a notícia é que vocês já vivem num país comunista, onde você tem órgãos que mandam, que decidem aonde você vai fazer qualquer pedaço de tijolo ser colocado dentro da sua propriedade privada. Que eu duvido muito que o que a gente tem é propriedade privada. Você precisa de, no mínimo, 19 documentos e 336 dias, em média, para você receber um documento chamado habite-se. É um documento onde o governo fala, você pode entrar. E a qualquer momento ele pode bater na porta, colocar um papelzinho e falar assim, olha, a gente teve uma ideia de fazer um viaduto, vaza. Você tem 90 dias para sumir daqui, porque a gente vai fazer um viaduto aqui na sua propriedade privada. A gente tem medo de gentrificação? Eu tenho medo do governo. É um absurdo o que eles fazem. Agora, o que isso tem a ver com mobilidade urbana? Pô, o Adriano é o cara da mobilidade urbana, fala de mobilidade urbana, e o que isso tem a ver, urbanismo com mobilidade urbana? Tem tudo a ver, pessoal. Quando a gente fala, por exemplo, do ministro da Fazenda, a gente tem um ministro da Fazenda, a inflação começa a subir, o que a gente fala? Tem que mandar ele embora, é um incompetente, né? Algum problema no meio ambiente, tem que mandar um ministro do meio ambiente embora. A minha pergunta é, por que a gente vê isso e não acha que está errado os nossos planejadores? A gente tem pessoas que falam que o problema é o dono do carro, e não o problema do planejador que está pensando nessa rua. Ah, o problema do carro. Então fala para o cara que está no busão lotado que o problema é o carro. Ele está preso lá no metrô, ele está preso, não funciona. O sistema de transportes no Brasil não funciona. E é por quê? Porque sistema de transporte, pessoal, é resultado. Se alguém chegar e falar assim, a solução para o transporte é não sei o quê, aí desconfia, não existe solução para o transporte, porque o transporte é justamente o resultado que nós temos da forma como nós estruturamos a cidade. Se você tem problema no trânsito numa cidade, o planejador urbano falhou miseravelmente para pensar aquela cidade. Ai, Adriano, mas a gente precisa planejar a cidade, senão vai ficar aquela cidade feia, aquela cidade horrível, vai ficar parecendo o Morro da Providência, aquela coisa horrível. Olhem para essa foto, que ninguém gosta de ver, e me digam, por que a gente acha isso feio, mas acha isso bonito? De boa, vou voltar. Jogo dos 7 erros. O que é isso e o que é isso? É a mesma coisa. Qual que é a diferença das duas fotos? Só tem uma diferença. Pobreza. É só isso. O problema aí não é espaço. O espaço está sendo usado da mesma forma. O espaço urbano utilizado aí é o mesmo. Né? E aí é engraçado porque se existe favela no Brasil, é porque a gente deixa muito caro o uso do solo. O pobre não consegue ter um lote regular. Ele não consegue emitir 19 documentos, esperar 300 dias. Ele não consegue comprar um terreno, que muitas cidades falam que o terreno mínimo tem que ser 400 metros quadrados, com recuo de não sei quantos metros, e no final das contas ele só pode construir em 50 metros. Fica muito caro um imóvel desse. O pobre tem que ir para a favela mesmo, porque infelizmente é lá que os recursos que ele tem conseguem entrar. E muitas das vezes é o problema de regulação urbana, o nosso licenciamento urbanístico é extremamente, podemos dizer um nome que o pessoal gosta de dizer, está na moda, fascista. Odeia pobre, quer que ele vá embora da cidade, porque pobre é feio. A gente já teve leis, chamado de leis de desfavelização, que jogavam os pobres para fora da cidade. Por quê? Porque a cidade tem que ser bonita, a cidade tem que ser linda, a cidade tem que ser igual Brasília. A cidade maravilhosa, a cidade planejada 100%, né? Olha que maravilha de cidade. Tem lugar que fica a casa, tem lugar que fica a padaria, tem lugar que fica a oficina, tem lugar que fica tudo, tem lugar para tudo em Brasília. Mas olha como é que o sistema de transporte de Brasília é complicado. Eu fiz um experimento, vou imaginar o seguinte, vamos imaginar que você mora em Brasília e vai comprar um cigarro, né? Eu fiz esse seguinte estudo. Em Brasília, você tem as superquadras, e dessas superquadras só existe residência e você tem que comprar nas entrequadras, porque é onde está o comércio. Mas aí ia ser muito maldade com Brasília. Então eu peguei um lugar mais próximo, peguei um posto de gasolina, que fica do lado da entrequadra, para ajudar um pouco a métrica. Se você sair do ponto A, que é onde você mora, ou qualquer uma dessas unidades habitacionais em Brasília, esses prédios, em Brasília tem limite de altura de prédio, parece com Porto Alegre, né? Tem lugar, lá proíbe também. Aí você vai sair daquele lugar e vai comprar um cigarro no posto de gasolina. Aquela distância linear entre a casa e o posto de gasolina é 300 metros. Mas se você for fazer o caminho que o Lúcio Costa pensou, né? Porque é uma maldade, todo mundo quando fala mal de Brasília fala mal do Oscar Niemeyer, né, gente? É um erro, a gente tem que falar mal do Lúcio Costa também, tá? Não só do Oscar. Esse caminho tem 600 metros quadrados, tem 600 metros. Então, você precisa andar muito para chegar no mesmo lugar. E é o interessante, todo mundo, de todos esses prédios, tem que fazer o mesmo caminho. Brasília não tem mais congestionamento nos eixos. Eles já têm congestionamento na tal das tesourinhas, que é justamente as vias de acesso. Então, assim, porque todo mundo tem que fazer o mesmo caminho. Por quê? Porque o planejador planejou essa maravilha, essa coisa linda, né, para fazer o caminho. Vamos pensar em um espaço não planejado, por exemplo. Eu peguei aqui como, por exemplo, um pedaço da cidade eterna de Roma. Eu peguei a mesma distância de 300 metros, que dá da Piazza Novana, até o Panteão, tem 300 metros. Vejam como, quando você tem uma construção de quadras um pouco irregular, pessoal, né, quem tem toque vai ficar um pouco chateado de ver o formato dessas quadras. Mas vejam, você tem muito mais opções de caminhos. Existem caminhos aí que você só consegue fazer a pé, e isso é ótimo. Você pode fazer a pé, você pode fazer de bicicleta, você aumenta a probabilidade de caminhos e o tamanho também ficou menor. A chance de você ter congestionamentos, de você ter nesse tipo de cidades, é muito menor do que essa questão de você ter esse problema. Além de outros diversos problemas. Esse é um ponto interessante que quem fala muito bem no livro dela é a Jane Jacobs. É um dos pontos que a Jane Jacobs coloca como um ponto importante, quadras pequenas para você facilitar a movimentação das pessoas. E o Brasil é muito engraçado, porque nós temos muitos arquitetos e urbanistas que gostam da Jane Jacobs, mas são extremamente planejadores do espaço urbano. São extremamente totalitaristas na hora de pensar no espaço urbano. E é engraçado que eu sou um estudioso de escola austríaca e muitos austríacos identificam a Jane Jacobs como uma libertária verdadeira. Ela tem ideias extremamente libertárias. Então, temos muitos economistas da escola austríaca que vão estudar urbanismo e veem a Jane Jacobs, poxa, essa mulher traz uma série de propostas libertárias e que dá para mudar a vida das cidades. E aí eu não entendo esse problema que o pessoal tem a respeito de gostar da Jane Jacobs, mas gostar ao mesmo tempo de ficar planejando demais a vida dos outros. E aí eu acredito que a escola austríaca, sim, tem uma série de fundamentos que pode contribuir na nossa discussão sobre urbanismo. Por exemplo, a questão de entender que a intervenção estatal ela não vai funcionar. E é verdade que se ela funcionasse, a gente não teria congestionamento, a gente não teria uma série de problemas relacionados ao transporte público. Por quê? Porque a gente fala muito de escola austríaca da teoria dos ciclos econômicos, mas nós temos a teoria do intervencionismo econômico que fala muito da questão dos desdobramentos e a gente entender os desdobramentos da ação do homem no dia a dia da sociedade. Entender que autoridades formais são mais importantes que autoridades informais. Não estou falando de autoridades ilegais, eu estou falando das autoridades que realmente estão no dia a dia das pessoas. Associações de bairros, paróquias, comunidades, condomínios, isso funciona muito mais do que um burocrata que pensa isso lá longe, que está lá longe. E a coisa mais importante de todas que a escola austríaca defende extremamente, e isso é vital para nossas cidades. A propriedade privada é o verdadeiro princípio regulador. Se tem alguém que pode regular a cidade, é a existência de propriedade privada, porque com propriedade privada você tem preço, com preço você tem incentivos, com incentivos você tem concorrência, você tem trocas voluntárias, você tem todo um processo econômico que nós, de forma errada, chamamos de mercado, como se fosse um monstro, um Godzilla que invade a sala gritando, o mercado, aquele monstro malvado, e que na verdade somos nós. O mercado são as pessoas. Então, por favor, governantes, arquitetos, urbanistas, parem de atrapalhar as pessoas. Eu quero terminar remetendo aqui a nossa Alice nos Países das Maravilhas. Se ela encontrasse com o gato na Pinheiros, por exemplo, o gato em vez de em cima de uma árvore, ele estaria em cima de um viaduto, e eu quis colocar ela dentro do Peugeot preto que está ali na foto, mas era muita sacanagem com a Alice colocar ela dentro de um Peugeot. Então eu coloquei ela só do lado de fora. Se ela fizesse a pergunta para o gato de qual caminho eu devo escolher, qual que seria a resposta do gato numa cidade como a nossa? Ele ia falar o seguinte: mesmo que você soubesse o caminho, tanto faz, você vai ficar preso no congestionamento. Muito obrigado, pessoal.
Obrigada, Adriano. Eu só espero que o Cal não casse meu registro quando ele souber que eu te trouxe para o Fórum da Liberdade. Sabe? Muito bem, obrigada, gente. A gente tem algumas perguntas, mas eu queria iniciar com uma que é saber se vocês pudessem apertar um botão vermelho e reiniciar as cidades. Vocês fariam isso? Vocês abandonariam tudo que foi construído de cidade, mesmo com os erros e acertos? E que diretrizes vocês usariam para reconstruir as cidades, se tivesse essa possibilidade?
Well, I probably would leave the cities as they are and create competing product and then let the people decide instead of pressing the red button.
Perfect.
Well, I will certainly not want to design the city. I think the city are designed by the people who live in it. So I will remove again all the regulations which are non-fire regulation, non-sanitary regulation, but which constrain the growth of floor space and land. I will let the people decide how much land and floor space they want to consume, and where they want to consume it. And the only thing I will do is improve the infrastructure to serve this, to allow people to circulate with it.
Por incrível que pareça, as cidades, não está difícil a gente mudar as cidades, é só a gente realmente evitar que o governo continue atrapalhando as pessoas, porque boa parte da cidade ela é resultado, muitas vezes, no caso do Brasil isso acontece muito, boa parte das cidades brasileiras são resultados de ocupações irregulares, que depois foram sendo regularizadas por questões até mesmo políticas. Então nós temos muita formação mais espontânea dentro das cidades do que a gente imagina. O que a gente tem que fazer é tirar a informalidade desse pessoal, da propriedade privada e deixar a cidade continuar crescendo sem ninguém atrapalhar.
Ótimo, obrigada. E a segunda pergunta é entender da opinião de vocês, como vocês acham que as cidades brasileiras poderiam se desenvolver, considerando que somos um país subdesenvolvido, no caso das cidades privadas? Seria viável, na tua opinião, Titus, termos cidades privadas no Brasil? Ou como poderíamos melhorar nossas cidades?
It's definitely possible if there is a political will to grant this freedom, right? It's not necessary to turn the whole country upside down. It's just if every single state has the right to create one special zone where different laws and also urbanism can be tried out, then it's possible here because you have already, I think, 27 states, something like that, right? And you have a lot of space and you have a lot of people who are a little bit tired of politics but willing to try out new things. So I would say, yes, Brazil is an ideal place. And then if you have 27 different models, you can also learn from them. The learning curve will be much steeper than what we have today. So I can only encourage the people here in the audience who are making laws to think about that.
Thank you.
I think people should be, of course, free to start new cities wherever they want, whether they are private or semi-private or whatever. But in the long run, I think that we move to cities not because of the infrastructure or even the housing. We move to cities because of the quality of the people who are already living there. And that's why new cities are very difficult to start. Who is going to be the first? So in this case, I think that there is a case for concentrating on the cities which exist. There is also a question of location. A city cannot be located anywhere, and there are only few locations which are left. If you see a historical city, it's because it was the location give them a comparative advantage. This comparative advantage doesn't exist anywhere. The only place where I could imagine a lot of new cities is on the northern route. Now that ice is melting, there is going to be a new route of trade between Asia and Europe on the Arctic, and I think that there is a possibility there of a lot of new cities in this case. But on the other, Magellan found and the Portuguese in general going around Africa found all the best place already, including Singapore. Thank you.
Aí eu acho que a gente já tem alguns experimentos de o que seria uma cidade privada. Um shopping center é um experimento de uma cidade privada. O que é um shopping center? São lojistas que desistiram da rua da cidade. O que é um jardins? São pessoas que desistiram da rua da cidade e foram para condomínios fechados. Então, o que a gente tem que fazer é com que essas áreas tenham menos intervenção estatal. Especificamente sobre o projeto do Titus, que eu sou um grande admirador, nós temos áreas chamadas no Brasil de ZPS que, cara, uma pequena mudança na legislação, é um problema lá dentro da Receita Federal, que não quer que isso passe, para você ter uma liberação maior dessas aplicabilidades para a gente ter, por exemplo, Free Cities em Brasil.
Obrigada.
Alain said is true. It's extremely hard to create a city from scratch and then find people moving there. You've heard about these Chinese ghost towns, right? On the other hand, it's also a question of pressure, right? If people are treated badly somewhere and we treat them better, then people will come more easily. And as you said, you can also expand existing cities by quarters that are planned for future expansion but are not used yet. And last but not least, because I am working on the front of really starting new cities, it is true that the best places are taken, but on the other hand, we have much better technology than the Portuguese had 500 years ago, so it's not absolutely necessary to be in the most fertile place or whatever, because technology is making good for it. Well, look at Dubai, right? I mean, it's the worst place you can start a city. And still, it's millions of people want to be there, and that is at least my thesis. If the framework is granting you much more liberties than somewhere else, then in the past, people were emigrating to America, to Brazil, where there was nothing, just because they wanted to start a new life, and they hoped for more freedom than they had in Europe. And this is my hope, that this is bringing people into the new cities.
Yes, I will support this idea about Dubai. You know, the main airport between Europe and Asia, when I started traveling internationally, was Tehran. You know, if you had to fly from Europe to India, for instance, your plane has to refuel in Tehran. And Tehran was a major airport, and then suddenly you had the revolution in Tehran, and again, that was a case where we say people make life very difficult for you. You have to find a new place. And the people in Dubai were smart enough to develop, to take this opportunity and replace Tehran. You know, they were at the same distance, actually. So that was, and they, you know, although there was a rather restrictive society, they had also the good sense to have a little perimeter where they were much less restrictive. So it was extremely a smart move to take advantage of a very good location which has not been used before. But thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking about Dubai, I mean, Dubai had the problem that too much was built, right? And now then there was the war in Russia and Ukraine. And suddenly the Russians are all coming to Dubai. So you can say, yeah, this is a coincidence. Yeah, but Dubai is prepared for those type of coincidences, and this is what a free city makes, right? There may be years when it's not much better than a traditional Brazilian city, but then you got a new government, and suddenly it's much more attractive to move. And that's what happened to Dubai in waves, right? Your first wave is the airport, and then you had other things, and now the war, and I heard that the real estate prices are really going up now because of all the Russians coming to Dubai. And this is just one thing, and other things might happen. And I think if you have really a long-term perspective for a new city and say, okay, this is really based on a real social contract, you have as much freedom as you can get in today's world, and then we just dare, and we just wait what's happening. Because my thesis is that the traditional mass democracies of the Western world, they will all develop into kind of social welfare state, and then they will be in debt, it will be not payable any longer, then they will get more authoritarian, and then the people say, okay, now it's too much. Right? So I think if we create a different system, and it's not necessary to win an election, then we can just sit and wait, in a way. Right? So this is at least the theory. We will see how it turns out in practice.
Certo. Principalmente no exemplo que o Titus traz das cidades privadas, a gente vê a importância da tecnologia, para que a gente possa construir um plano diretor mais moderno, que mude com as movimentações da cidade. E a pergunta é, vocês acham que a tecnologia ajuda a gente a alcançar essa cidade ideal? ironicamente, voltar à cidade tradicional? Ou essa mudança não tem muito a ver com a tecnologia? Qual a opinião de vocês?
Eu acredito que a tecnologia sim é importante, mas nós estamos tendo um movimento das smart cities, que seria esse exemplo de uso de tecnologia nas cidades, mas infelizmente a tecnologia está sendo usada para justamente evitar que isso aconteça, que a melhoria da cidade aconteça, para aumentar o poder totalitarista das autoridades. A tecnologia nas cidades é muito mais para você colocar um reconhecimento facial para fiscalizar a pessoa do que dar informações a respeito, por exemplo, do trânsito. Então, se a gente quer ter cidades inteligentes, a tecnologia, como é que ela ajudaria? Ela ajudaria coletando todas as informações da cidade e deixando esses dados públicos, para que empresas se interessassem pela oferta de serviços que resolvessem aqueles problemas identificados nas informações que são colocadas públicas. E não como está sendo feito hoje. Você está fazendo essas coletas de informações para o governo aumentar mais ainda o seu poder opressor em cima das pessoas. Por que o governo é tão hábil e tão rápido para fazer o cálculo do IPTU e é tão lento para resolver o problema básico que é tampar a porcaria do buraco na rua? É impossível a gente achar que isso faz sentido.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, collecting data for the sake of collecting data in itself is not very smart, frankly. But I think technology can be very, very important to understand what is happening in our cities and to react to it. For instance, in New York now, we have a problem with empty offices, but we don't know really how many empty offices are there because very often the leases are still running. But it's very important, I think, for managing the city to understand what is happening. The technology I discovered recently, my colleagues at NYU are able to get the consumption of water per block and that tells them how many people are going to the office every day. And that is a type of technology. Again, it's not linked to a person. You know, you cannot spy on people with that. It's just per block. It's aggregated. It tells us very quickly what is happening in our city and how we can react to it. And I think that technology in this sense is very important. But again, you know, it's like a hammer. You know, a hammer is it's a very good tool, except of course you can hit somebody on the head on it. So hammer itself is not good or bad. It's just the same for technology.
I totally agree. I mean, technology is always a two-sided sword, right? It can be used against you and can be used in your favor. But in this case, I think it's in our favor. Because the internet and also decentralized energy production in the future, and we will have small nuclear reactors which are providing a city of 100,000 for 25 years before you have to refuel it. That means total independence from any state electricity companies. And if you have cheap and abundant energy, you can basically do everything, right? You can keep it cool in the desert and you can water the desert and whatever. So I think the surveillance technology, smart city can be a danger, and it's much more important to have a free city than a smart city. Right? That is what I say to all these fancy designers. But the point is, in our time, a handful of people can run a big operation, because we can contract out everything. And there's a network through the internet where we can find people who are doing their jobs. And a lot of things can be done remotely, not all of them, of course. But the single person today has more power than it had ever before in human history. So this is also a chance. And that means we can create independent cities that are easier created than in the past, where you needed 10,000s of workers, the blessing of the bishop and the prince and whatever, right? So I think in this particular case, technology is a chance rather than a threat to us.
That's it. Bom, pessoal, muito obrigada. Foi o painel Planejamento Central, Ordem Espontânea, e seguimos com o Fórum da Liberdade.